You got a rich history with the Hilux, Mr. Marsh.
I do. You know, the Hilux was the first vehicle I drove through Africa was a Hilux, and the interesting story was it didn't belong to me. It belonged to one of my best friends, and he ended up marrying a girlfriend of mine. And I told him at the time, I said, "Listen, I'm going to have your Hilux one day, and I'm going to drive it through Africa."
Ex-girlfriend, I would assume.
Well, at that point, it was after that it was ex. So he ended up marrying a girlfriend, and they were very happy. We sort of moved on, the two of us.
Yeah.
But he had this beautiful Hilux, and I said to him, "I love this vehicle, and I'm going to drive it through Africa." Yeah. And the one day, the Hilux came into my workshop in Johannesburg, and the clutch was gone, and his wife just hated the Hilux. It was just heavy and clunky around town. And I had a little Golf that I'd prepared, and I phoned him up and I gave her the keys and I said, "Thank you for the Hilux." And I phoned him up and I said, "Thank you for the Hilux." I won't repeat what he said, but anyway, this Hilux I stripped it down to every last nut and bolt.
So that was a fair trade then.
Well, I think I did really well. I think he did really well, but I think at the end of the day, you know, to take a vehicle like that, this had been my dream since I was 10 years old, remember? Okay, so being 10 years old with the vision of driving through Africa, living in South Africa where you couldn't because of sanctions, when it opened up and Nelson Mandela came into power, that's when it opened up for us to really travel freely into Africa. So I was timing this whole Hilux build, and I remember I had everything. I was building this car perfect. Okay, don't do that. You don't strip every car down to its last nut and bolt, because I promise you now, that's a restoration. That's not building a vehicle for overland. It doesn't need to be that perfect. It needs to be reliable. I learned a lot. I took too much weight. We made do with steel canopy. We couldn't afford fuel tanks, so we put fuel cans up. We couldn't afford fancy suspension, so we just added some extra leaves on. But it taught me a lot, you know, and I learned a lot about a vehicle. The engine I put in was the 2.4 litre Cressida engine, petrol engine.
Very, very strong engine.
It was a good motor.
Isn't that from the old Luxy used to have that?
Yeah, it was actually the Cressidas used to have them as well. I think it was a 22R engine.
24 valve.
Yeah, 24 valve, beautiful motor, and the car drove beautifully. We did 70,000 kilometers in that truck, right up through Africa and right back down, exploring probably some very remote parts that I don't see many of my clients going to. In Ethiopia, some really amazing cave systems, Simeon Mountains, climbing all the mountains. The truck took us everywhere. We were overloaded, we broke springs, I cracked the chassis in half, the motor never let me down.
Probably first time every time.
Well, you know, you learn. And but what it taught me was every time I went to a workshop, I used to go in and ask the guys, what were the weak points on the cars? I'd go to the hunters, I'd go and talk to them, and I'd find out, what problems are you having in all the Land Cruisers? So I learned so much about what worked, what didn't work, why, how you repaired it, how you welded chassis together. There were guys in Kariba who used to rebuild these old Land Cruiser 40 series. People would bring their cruisers to them, and they had this amazing workshop. And you go in and sit down with the guys and ask them, what do you do? How do you do that? Why do you weld a chassis like this? And you learn, oh, what's right, what's wrong. So I took that, and with my engineering background and my mechanical abilities, I decided that I wanted to make my life, how would I say, take a vehicle and really understand what you can do with it. So if I could take my life and really go and explore remote parts of the world, why couldn't other people do that? And people did do it. But the hardest challenge was, how would I say, taking people who didn't think they could do it and empowering them to go and do it. So you've never driven a four-wheel drive. And in the 18 years that I had my business in England, about 80% of my clients had never driven a four-wheel drive. They had a dream. And the whole focus was to take their dream, to empower them, train them, equip them, and prepare them to go and do a big expedition of a lifetime. You know, and we go back to the Hilux. It served me so well. I mean, yes, today when we build them, people put great suspensions on. You know, you iron out all those problems. We don't carry the weight we did. Canopies are much better. Everything over that time, we're talking 30 years ago, where things have really moved on, you know. So when I was starting to prepare this vehicle, it took a few years to build it up. But the lessons learned, the experiences on the road, the people we met, I can still recall being in campsites where I connected with people, where you shared a meal together, or you drove past each other and you'd flash lights and stop the cars, and you'd take your Michelin map out, put it on the bonnet, and over some coffee or tea, you'd share your knowledge. You know? So I've got very fond memories of traveling vast distances. The Hilux was an incredibly capable vehicle. Bulletproof, simple. They've refined them to vehicles like this that's standing next to us here. They've given it a lot more comfort. They've introduced a lot more technology into the vehicle. It works. You've got to be mindful of technology, because when it's very remote and you're far away from workshops that are equipped to deal with it, that can give you some challenges. So, you know, there's the balance. What are you looking for in a vehicle? And can this vehicle work? It can. What are your needs? Would a double cab Land Cruiser suit you better? What budget do you have? Or is a troop carrier something you're looking for? So
And that's why somebody like you can really be of assistance to somebody who's got no idea of what they're looking for.
I think I find the biggest challenge people have is that there's so much information out there. So you'll talk to this guy with his experience, that person with their experience, and you're going to find that everyone's got an opinion based on their experience. Okay, when you spend 30 years preparing people to go on expeditions, I draw on that experience. I draw on the lessons that clients have taught me. When they've been on expeditions and they've come back and they've shared with me what we didn't get right, how we could have improved, what we should do better, what broke, what worked, what didn't work. Those are lessons that they're invaluable. They're not written down in
And those
books.
are such important questions. You're always asking people, how was the car, how was this, how was that? And that it all goes in your database.
Well, you know, that's to me the key thing. When you bring it back, the vehicles, and when we built vehicles in England, I'd bring them back into the workshop and I'd say to my clients, come and share your photographs with me. I really want to hear your stories. I want to know where you've been, what you've seen. We can relate to it. It's very difficult when you go back home and your family has never traveled, never been in a four-wheel drive. I'm talking, you know, all friends. And now you're trying to relate this experience. And they can't quite grasp it. So their bandwidth to absorb the information is small because they don't have the experience. If you sit down with someone who's traveled the world, who's been in four-wheel drives, who's done similar trips to you, you could spend weeks chatting and sharing experiences. So when you're looking to do a trip like that, I love connecting people up who've just done a trip, who want to do a trip because information is more relevant. Excuse me. And it just you share the energy. There's something about the overland community. It's a fantastic energy, and the energy is very collaborative in how we share, and people want to help, and it's a good community to be a part of.
Positive community.
Yeah, it's a positive community. It's a positive community of people who want to take their lives and maybe go out and explore and do something different. Maybe they've spent their life doing a career. Kids have left them. They've now got a point in their time where they've got time on their hands. What do we do? How do we make our time really count and do something different? I mean, the one couple we're going to build a vehicle for, his wife's an artist. There's a section in the vehicle that we're going to build just for her canvases and all her art equipment. Because as much as you've got your photography, she's going to have her artwork, and that's great because now you can go and
This
enjoy
will
it.
take you places where most people won't be able to get to, and you'll have original artwork.
Well, you'll have that time and space to create something which is different, you know. And I think again, it's about making time. Time. Joe will always say to me, "Time is my most precious resource. Tomorrow is not promised." I think that's such a valuable quote. When you think about it and you say, "Tomorrow is not promised," what does that mean to me? What am I doing about it today? My dream that's sitting here, how am I actually reacting to the dream I want to do? How am I going to make this happen? So when people come to me and we sit down, we've got to take all the information and research they've done, and we've got to sit down and work out what is going to work for them. And that's what you know. I'm not the only person who builds vehicles, but generally, if you're going to sit down and build vehicles, that's what you want someone to do. You want someone who understands you, listens to you, going to give you the solutions that you need. You might be traveling with a 1-year-old or 2 young kids. How does that work? How do you build that into the picture? So it's really key to look and say, understand where you want to go. What is the right fit? There's a choice of vehicles. The vehicle's one small part of what you want in the trip you're going to do. The preparation as far as equipment you need in the car, where you're going to put it in the car, how you're going to use the kit, how you're going to learn your own skill sets, and then of course how you prepare yourself. So the journey actually started when you said, I'm going to drive my vehicle to some remote part of the world, and you've put that goal out there. Then you start verbalizing it. Now it starts getting real, because now people are looking at you. Some are telling you you're mad and nuts. You want to go traveling with small kids, and what about this? And actually, if you just trust your gut, you know, we've got our brain and we've got our head brain and we've got our gut brain. How often have we gone in life and we've had this feeling that something's not right or something's right? You meet someone and you go, it just feels right.
Yeah,
trust that.
exactly.
Really.
How do you separate between your gut and your fear?
Fear's not a bad thing. Fear's actually
Fear of the unknown sometimes.
Yeah, well, I think fear. I ask that question to people. I say, "What's your biggest concern when you go on an expedition?" It's a really good question. And I say to people, "So let's understand what's the fear." Now, the fear can be driven by a number of things. It can be driven by overwhelm. It's like this massive new arena I'm getting into. It's new technology. It's new stuff. It's kit and it's equipment and it's vehicles and it's mechanics and it's too much for me. Don't let that take away your drive and dream to do it, because you can overcome every bit of that if you take it in bite-sized chunks and you go, what do I need to learn? Take it into perspective. Grow your experience slowly. You know, we never got fit to run Comrades or a London Marathon in 1 week. We slowly prepared our training, and we slowly climbed that mountain day by day, foot by foot, up you go till you reach the top of Kilimanjaro. So when you approach that in how you're going to look at the overland travel, it becomes much more manageable. You actually look at your picture and you step back, zoom back and say, what would I ultimately like to do? So that's one of my key things I'll say to people. Let's zoom back. What does the big picture look like? Is the big picture you're traveling in Africa? Well, what about South America? Have we thought about Australia? Okay. And then you open up the parameters. Now the fear you had of how do I do this? Or how do I go to the loo in the bush? Or what if I have an accident? Or what if the security is always a big question. Security is something to respect, understand and prepare for, not be fearful of. Because when you're fearful of something, you're not prepared. Okay? So build up confidence that you don't fear it, you don't want to be blasé, you need a healthy respect. Now I feel there's a difference between a healthy respect and fear. Fear is out of control. Okay? I want to be in control of the situation. I want to know I've got equipment or I've got some knowledge so that I can deal with the situation. I might not have experienced it. I can't teach you all the different recovery situations you're going to get into. Okay? Now that, for some people, that's a big thing. What if I get stuck?
Some of it you got to learn on the job.
Yeah, but that's half the fun.